I am very pleased to present to you a report on the City of Paramount Street Racing Enforcement Program. As John indicated, if you recall, you as a City Council boldly directed the City Attorney's Office a couple of years ago to come up with some regulatory provisions to address this problem of street racing that is occurring in our intersections, and also exhibition of speed, as well as spectators attending these. Keep in mind, I wanted to underscore that this was a bold decision to make because most cities did not want to deal with that. And so you took the reins and you decided we're going to do something about it. So without further ado, I'd like to present Lieutenant Camacho.
Thank you, Mr. Kavanaugh. Madam Mayor, City Council. I'll be covering the enforcement overview of our street racing program. Before I get started, I want to touch on a couple of the street racing incidents this past weekend because we are presenting today on this topic. We had a couple of incidents and service calls related to street racing in the area of Garfield and Orange with the cross of Somerset, and one on Paramount at the cross of Jackson. Friday night, Jackson Street and Paramount Boulevard, a call came in at around 2:30 in the morning. The call stated vehicles were racing in the area. We had one of our first patrol units on scene within 2 minutes. We had a total of 8 deputy personnel patrol units that responded to the actual call, and vehicles began dispersing prior to all units arriving. On Saturday night into Sunday morning, on 2:13, from Garfield into Orange with the cross of Somerset, a call was assigned at 12:34 a.m. that stated numerous cars were blocking the intersection. During that incident, we had 1 arrest for a DUI, 1 vehicle impounded, 4 citations issued for spectators, and just to be clear, the detention was over at Rosecrans and Garfield. I know we've discussed before where these detentions and the enforcement usually happens away from the actual location of incident. Back to the enforcement, I want to start with our training. As a department, we continuously provide training for our Paramount City deputies. Our deputies receive annual street racing training from our Deputy District Attorney, Kelly Tapman, our Detective Bureau, our Public Safety Director, and myself regarding new laws, our Manual of Policy and Procedures, and the Paramount Municipal Ordinances. During this training, there's also discussion as far as tactical responses in dealing with large crowds and hundreds of vehicles. We've also reached out to our partners at CHP, the California Highway Patrol, which have presented at our trainings and provided their expertise regarding illegal street racing enforcement. Some of the street racing statistics we have, starting with the calls for service, we had a total of 465 service calls regarding street racing activity for the year of 2021. Our lowest were January through April with an average of 31 calls per month. Our highest months being July with 64, August with 51, and September with 54.
The first slide we have is really just talking about our unit in itself. The next slide that I have just talks about more of the history of sideshows. They did actually come out of LA and Oakland. Those are the 2 primaries that they've been existing for decades. This whole aspect of sideshows, takeovers, and drag races, typically more hailing from the Compton area. Unfortunately, that as they've spread out and tried to find more locations to do what they're doing, is why they found your city as well as many other cities. So a lot of these sideshows, they continue to grow with popularity because of social media is driving all of this. And it's, as far as the narcissism as well as the egos of the individuals involved in this, is what drives the growth and the activities in general. This is the actual video which we actually seized this vehicle, and I believe it was something that was more negotiated between the lien holder. But this was actually one in the city of Paramount that also the Sheriff's Department responded and assisted us with.
East on Rosecrans, south on Garfield. East on Rosecrans, south on Garfield. Hey, somebody hold that intersection if it turns red. L2, I have it.
A lot of foot traffic, Garfield, just north, or Jackson, just north of Garfield.
Air 51, do you have a car doing donuts right now?
Yeah, that's a firm. So it can be a white Dodge Challenger.
Copy that, a white Dodge Challenger doing donuts now.
Try and follow that thing and get the driver.
Monroe.
Keep going.
Good. Stop that car right there. Stop that one.
That's a Camaro.
Okay, drivers being detained now, and info for the units is all recorded, so good on the recording for the donuts.
In this particular takeover, our fixed-wing aircraft did observe the Camaro doing the burnouts and doing the donuts in the city. Because they actively observed it, allows us to do the enforcement stop and the arrest for the street raising and the takeover. We did work with Mr. Kavanaugh on this one with the arrest report coinciding, and making sure we put together the entire report and the investigation in a comprehensive manner so that we could maximize the ability to use your new ordinance that we had to try and seize the vehicle and remove it permanently from use out there in the takeover groups.
Next, Madam Mayor, we're going to have a report from our Deputy District Attorney, Kelly Tatman, on the administrative hearing process, which is the second component of our enforcement program.
Good evening. Just to touch a little bit on the donuts and the street racing that you just saw in the video, and Lieutenant Camacho spoke briefly of it. The donuts in the intersections are cases in which we are charging felony vandalism, but they are not part of a forfeiture proceeding, because the forfeiture proceedings only deal with violations of Vehicle Code Section 23109A and C, which is speed contests where two vehicles are racing each other, or a single individual is racing down the street for attention and for exhibition of speed. Now, I sort of laid out, just like in Lieutenant Camacho's presentation, the types of cars that have been up for administrative hearing, substantially similar to the cars that were listed in the vandalism donut cases Lieutenant Camacho spoke about. What's interesting to note in all of these administrative hearing statistics is a lot of kids driving cars registered to their parents. Of the average age of these drivers committing the Vehicle Code Section 23109 offenses is 21 years old. The youngest being 18, the oldest being 31. And not surprisingly, just like in the donut cases, the cities of residence. Out of those 18 hearings, only 3 were Paramount residents. But here's the good part. I think we are establishing a very hard line here in Paramount. I think the word is getting out. Like Mr. Kavanaugh said, we're not going to eradicate this. We're not ending it. This is going to continue on. We're deterring it. And the word's getting out that if you're going to do this nonsense, you're not doing it in Paramount. And if you do it in Paramount, we have a street racing task force, we have regular patrol deputies who are trained, and we're going to get you, and you're going to pay a fine, or you're going to head over to Compton Criminal Court, or your vehicle is soon to be owned by the city of Paramount.
There we go. The criteria that we do highway design is we follow the Federal Highway Administration. We also have the California State Highway Streets and Highway Code. We have the American Association of State Highway Transportation Officials, the California MUTCD, the Manual for Uniform Traffic Control Devices, and the Institute of Transportation Engineers. The reason I want to share that is because that's the data that we have to use when we do highway design and what we're trying to put out in the roadway to keep things safe. On this next slide, what we're showing is various types of street width reductions and some of the pros and cons to these types of reductions. These are some measures that have been performed on some of our arterial streets, such as Paramount, and they do reduce speeds. It reduces the crosswalk distance between intersection to intersection. It also increases the cons are is that it increases traffic congestion, reduces parking, and prevents right turn movements. So it does kind of impede on just the average traffic flow. Vertical deflection, sometimes we look at these as speed humps, basically speed humps, speed cushions, speed tables, raised intersections. With these types of measures, they do reduce speeds, they deter traffic from speeding. It is one of the more lower cost traffic calming measures. The cons are that they do They may divert traffic onto other residential neighborhoods. It also compromises emergency vehicles' response time, except for like the speed cushions. And there is a potential for property damage. And the reason I say property damage is, for example, on a residential street, you should be traveling 25 miles an hour, maybe 30. But if you're not obeying the law and you hit one of these, there is a potential to go out of control and hit property damage. This was at the city of Long Beach. It was a DUI, and it was a traffic circle in a local neighborhood. And as you can see, the boulder and the car hit the other vehicles, and there was severe damage to that in that area.
I just want to give some things as what's next. These are just recommendations that we're thinking of, but obviously you as a city council, we need your input too to make this program continue to be successful. So what's next? We want to continue to improve report writing and train deputies. As we said before, that is really, really a fundamental foundation that we need to make sure that if we ever go to a forfeiture, that we have the probable cause to, and that's accurate report writing and then training. We want to continue to educate the public of Paramount's ordinances and the consequences of street racing in the city of Paramount. I think we're doing that. I think the word's getting out, but we want to continue to push that. We want to continue to educate the public on street racing dangerousness and encourage residents and businesses to notify law enforcement and public safety with information that will assist in street racing enforcement. That goes back to what you were saying, Mayor, where it's really good to have people call in if they see this. And this will help to get law enforcement out there on a more proactive basis. We want to bring back to the City Council some amendments to the ordinance number 1134 and 1135. Just by way of example, one of the challenges that we've had in administrative hearings in our initial ordinance, we basically have put the burden on public safety to get an administrative hearing done within 2 days after we notify them. That is not necessarily a very pragmatic, because we're using data ticket as our independent administrative hearing officers, and we don't always get a hearing officer within that time frame. We want to make sure it is short as possible, but at the same time, it's got to be realistic. So we may extend that out a little bit, and we'll bring that back to you. The other thing that we're considering and maybe bringing back to you is under 1135, increasing the fines for spectators so that we create a bigger deterrent for those who wish to participate in the gatherings of these speed racers. As we kind of talked in the very beginning, a lot of these takeovers are dependent on spectators being there. If nobody's there, there really isn't a whole lot of incentive because they want spectators. So if we can somehow increase the fines for spectators, that may deter them from coming out.